I'd like to recognize a few university and system CIOs that are in the audience that are important to MCNC. Larry Conrad is the CIO at UNC Chapel Hill, joined us earlier. John Smith at North Carolina Central University is here. And then John Lydon, who is CIO for the University of North Carolina System, is with us. Along with Tracy, John, Larry, and John serve to advise us on where we go into the future with the network and think of innovative ways that we can become more involved in the community. Larry Conrad, in particular, is leading our effort in telehealth. As we all know, the University of North Carolina has both a healthcare education and a working hospital that are renowned throughout the country, as Duke does as well. So Tracy's been involved as well. But telehealth is very important to us. We have a few board members here as well. I've mentioned Jane Patterson earlier. Don Hiley is here. Don is a former IBM executive and former CIO at Fidelity Investments. Don is a member of our board. And then, as mentioned, Tom Rabin, our chairman, is here. As Myra mentioned, Tom is former executive vice president at Red Hat and now is chairman and founder of NewKind, which brings open source thinking to all kinds of disciplines. Tom, thank you for your service as board chair. And Don and Jane, Jane's been involved with us since the beginning. Don's a more recent addition to the board, and we've benefited greatly. You know, one of the things you always want in a person who kind of has my role today is the ability to read and follow the agenda. And I screwed up. So Brian Williams has no threat to his job at NBC or any of the other anchors because I did mess up. But as Dave and I were talking about this, it actually kind of works better. But it's my pleasure to introduce the Chief Marketing Officer of Extreme Networks, Dave Ginsburg, who's going to moderate the CEO panel. Dave oversees global marketing activities for the company and is responsible for all aspects of corporate marketing, product management, solutions marketing, and outbound communications activities. So a huge and significant role. Dave brings 25 years of industry experience in marketing and technical networking to Extreme. If you listen to Dave's bio, you will find that this is not the first time he and Oscar have worked together. It seems to be a long-term collaboration that has spanned a few years. Most recently, Dave served as Vice President of Marketing for InnoPath, a privately owned company focused on over-the-air smartphone management and customer care. Prior to that, Dave served as Vice President of Marketing at Lucent Technologies, where he was responsible for all aspects of Lucent's carrier Ethernet solutions, marketing, product strategy, and business operations. Prior to Lucent, Mr. Ginsburg served as Senior Vice President of Marketing and Product Management at Riverstone Networks, and other leadership roles included Vice President of Marketing at Allegro Networks, Vice President of Product Marketing at Nortel Networks. He has also held various positions with Cisco, Alcatel, and the U.S. Army. In addition, he has authored several books on the topic of internet networking, including Implementing IP Services in the Network Edge and Implementing ADSL and ATM Solutions for the Enterprise Internetworking. Dave, welcome, and you're going to introduce the panel and moderate.
Okay, thank you very much. The corner here, and Brooks, come up. I'll introduce you. Glenn, thank you. Joe. And hopefully Oscar, Oscar, you're back, great, okay. So Oscar and Joe obviously need no introduction, and you heard a little bit from Glenn, but I think what wasn't really brought to the forefront was some of the pioneering work he did in the early days of TCP/IP and Internet Exchange Points, as well as NSFNet, SuraNet, as we were joking about earlier, and you were president of the National Lambda Rail, not to mention on the commercial side, you were CTO of Nobel Networks. True. And then Brooks Raiford, 5th year of CEO of North Carolina Technology, and we'll talk about that, the primary voice of the tech sector in the state, and I'm sure everyone's aware of that. Native of North Carolina, you've held previous leadership roles in business, government, and private sectors. Okay, so let me start it out with you, Brooks. Put you on the hot seat. About an hour ago, we heard some really interesting things from the policy side, and it looks like North Carolina's really cracked that secret code in understanding what it takes to drive the effective combination of policy frameworks and technology and advancement. And honestly, coming from California, I'm a little bit envious here in terms of what you've all been able to accomplish versus what we sometimes can't accomplish out on the West Coast there. So give me a little bit about what your influence is on the policy framework and where NCTA plays the role.
Sure.
Do you need this?
Thanks. It's on? Is it on? Can you hear me back there? Okay.
It's also recorded.
Gotcha. I want to make sure, so speed it up is what you're telling me. Thanks for the invitation to be on the panel today. A lot of our member companies and organizations are here, and Joe, as any good leader does, recognizes board members, and so many of them are the same for us. Joe was a former chairman, as a matter of fact, in a previous role of ours, and Tom and others, Don, Hunter Guzman's here. Jane Patterson, make it a point to either be born to or work for important women, and Jane's one of them. I was not born to her, I worked for her. She's sort of like a mom to me. But there are a lot of impressive people. I mentioned Jane because, as has been alluded to before, decades ago, going forward, a lot of people and a lot of organizations and a lot of companies and state and local governments have done things sometimes in silos and often in partnership to get us where we are. So, you know, if you eat a great stew, hopefully it's not just one ingredient that made it a good stew. It's all those ingredients together that caused that to be the case. And another analogy you often hear is the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. I think it's like any team, organization, or institution. You might not be number one in any one category that really stands out, but you're really good at lots of things, and it makes you sort of the best or a peer leader. And I think that's sort of the case in North Carolina. We've had a lot of firsts. We've also had a lot of visionary leaders, elected and otherwise, who have pushed and pushed early. Now it seems like a no-brainer to do some of the things that we do, but it wasn't a no-brainer at the time. Like Myra mentioned earlier from the governor's office, many of us who have what sound like leadership roles in technology are not technologists. I'm certainly not. But I remember Jane and Governor Hunt and others talking about that 20 and 30 years ago. It's, you know, I'm not here to say that technology is great for technology's sake. I'm here to say technology is all about driving, as someone put it earlier today, the improvement of the human condition, which is to really make life better in every way that matters. And if that's the policy goal, or if that's the end goal, then the policy should be driven around that. So the secret sauce is the connectivity among all of our sectors over a long period of time. And I think what you probably heard today, some of the names we've talked about here in this room and others, there have been a lot of really important leadership people doing this for a very long time together, and a lot of new partners coming along the way. So I think we're unusual in being a fairly large state geographically and population, but with a core of leadership that has really been at this for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So let me, Joe, let me just pass the baton to you. And once again, maybe some of the same questions. Sure. What's the secret sauce, and how not only, you know, the future North Carolina, but interest, you know, from my thought, how some of the other states might be able to emulate your successes?
You know, Dave, I want to, I'll use one story to kind of illustrate why I think we're a little bit unique in this. 7 years ago, when we were talking about connecting the school districts to the NCREN backbone, what we were basically saying to our private sector carriers is that we want you to sacrifice these kind of low bandwidth connections that you give to the school districts today, and move to providing us tail circuits that connect to the backbone network rather than giving them a direct connection to the internet. We wanted to greatly expand the bandwidth that were available to the school districts, but it did involve some private sector sacrifice. And NCTA was the organization that was key kind of in that discussion. They got folks together. As Brooks said, I was in a different role at the time. I was at the table in that role, along with folks from AT&T and at the time Sprint, which was the incumbent provider for the eastern part of the state, and Time Warner Cable, which is the incumbent cable. And those private sector companies agreed to give up those relatively low bandwidth but very lucrative connections in rural areas in order to connect to the backbone. And move their business from providing direct ISP service to getting revenue for those local circuits. Now that has turned into a great scenario for everyone involved. As I mentioned, those local circuits continue to grow in bandwidth, so revenue continues to grow off of those. In addition, because we opened up the pipes to the school districts, they have been more qualified for E-rate funds, and they've been able to upgrade those internal networks, the internal district networks, and draw down more E-rate funds. And a lot of those internal network managements for those school districts go to those large incumbent providers. We have continued in that spirit of cooperation. This is always going to be an area where if you have the right future vision of where this can go, everybody can grow. You may have to make some short-term sacrifices to do that, and we all do that as organizations. But long-term, we think about the long-term and the benefit to the state. Tracy Sari's here, who's a great partner to us. She's regional manager for AT&T. And our conversations that we have with Tracy and their team have dramatically shifted over the last 5 years from, you're taking away business from us. Why are you publicly funded to do this? You're a private nonprofit. What are you doing in this space? To, okay, now you've got infrastructure all over the state that we can utilize to service our customers better, so that not as many people raise their hands when they say that we have bad cell service at home. That's not AT&T's goal. I know that from talking to them, that's not their goal. And we now have a piece of that puzzle that could make this system better. And in North Carolina, we've chosen to kind of move forward and look forward. It is not always easy, but everybody at the table has been here for the benefit of the state, and I think that's what makes us unique. So, one of the things that you wanted to address was, are we unique as a state? Yeah, we're going to be pretty unique as a state with this infrastructure, particularly owning the fiber, having it buried, having it installed in a world-class manner. There's no other state in the country that is doing it the way we're doing it, and making it totally open access with really no deals on the table coming in to utilize the fiber. Michigan will have an infrastructure that's about the same, but it's all aerial, and they've already sold off pieces of the network, so there's not that much fiber for innovation on Merit's network. So we're going to be very unique when it comes to this, and it's really a seed for economic development and for innovation. But it's only possible because we have all worked together in an open communication setting, and everyone's been willing to sacrifice at the table. So what's going on in Washington right now, I think they could take a lesson from what we've been able to do in North Carolina, is that we haven't had, our self-interest hasn't trumped our common interest. And I think that's the biggest thing from my perspective that we've been able to accomplish over the last couple of decades. And again, that was seeded with Jane and with Governor Martin and other folks who, from both sides of the aisle in North Carolina, have set the framework that the state is what's important and the citizens are what's important.
That's excellent. We can all take a learning